Hi everyone, my name is Adi and welcome back to the channel. As you're probably aware, the regional qualifier stage of the Players' Cup 2 just wrapped up this past weekend and they have narrowed down the 256 player field to the top 4 players from each region who will compete in the grand finals of this tournament this coming December. Today I am so excited to introduce one of the top 4 players from North America who went undefeated through the qualifying rounds, Donald Smith Jr. Donald, how are you doing?
Yo, what's up? I'm doing great.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I just started playing VGC this year, like in January. Um, Before that, I used to be a professional Magic player, but I had to stop that career short because I got hired with Wizards of the Coast to design Magic cards. And after a few years of doing that, I just needed a competitive outlet again, and VGC was perfect for me.
Yeah, and I know that I've seen you face in online tournaments. It must have been really weird to enter a competitive game that really thrives on having in-person tournaments and then all of a sudden not have any in-person tournaments for the entire year.
Yeah, it was disappointing because I tried a lot of like other card games and stuff, like Hearthstone and stuff. But the thing that I love about VGC is like seeing people in person, going to locals and like going to regionals. Just because like it's more about like the friends and the connections than
Mhm.
anything for me. And yeah, I was really disappointed with everything that happened.
Did you get a chance to go to any of the early season events?
Yeah, I went to one regional in Collinsville. I went 6-3. That was good for like 30th place. So I didn't like top cut, but I got like a bunch of CP out of it. And apparently it was a pretty good result. I was sad I didn't make top cut, but people were like, oh, good job.
Yeah, that's still really good, especially for your first major. And of course, you've seen a lot of success in these online tournaments that we've had. Can you tell me a little bit about how, like, the last year in terms of Pokemon and how you've improved as a player?
Yeah, it's like very similar to Magic in a way, not the gameplay, but like all the like externalities around it. So I think a big part of my success is like I already know how to play tournaments in terms of like I know how to like sleep well, eat well, and like metagame for things, just in a general sense. And I also know how to like beat players that are better than me. Like I know when to take risk, and I know like what types of teams I should use early on in my career. That'll give me the best chance against players that are better than me. Because that's in Magic, I was kind of a newbie too, because Magic's been around since '93 or whatever, and I only started playing in 2013. So like that's what I had to learn in Magic. So I just get to reapply it in VGC of like, oh, I'm the new guy on the block. Like, how do I punch up, basically?
Yeah, definitely. And so, if you had to give some advice to new players who wanted to get good as quickly as you got good at VGC, what would you tell them?
Um, yeah, I'd say focus. Like the main thing is to focus on your like own game plan and your own. Like, don't try to like metagame or like counter what they're doing because it's just too much of a knowledge gap to overcome. Um, so that's why, like, yeah, I just recommend like finding not like a cheesy team or a gimmicky team, but just like a solid but aggressive team. So what I've been using before Series 7 was like I was basically only using sun and sand, and like I would just Dynamax T-Tar, Earthquake, Excadrill, Proc Weakness Policy, and just like roll through tournaments like that, and then Venusaur, kind of the same thing. So I recommend like finding strategies like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Those are, of course, two of the strongest types of archetypes that have been throughout VGC 20. Of course, I think now we're in VGC 21, but in VGC 20, Sand and Sun were kind of omnipresent. And then on top of that, from what I've seen over my like 3 years playing VGC now, is that the players, especially the players who overachieve early on in their career, tend to be just get very, very comfortable with a team, and having comfort with one individual team, they really have that. It's almost like that reaction to situations, and they really like, very often overperform because of their comfort level with an individual team.
Yeah, definitely. And like, yeah, I like sticking to like similar team. Like I call them like molds or something. So like a team style that I really like playing is like weather setter, weather abuser, trick room setter, trick room abuser, redirection, and damage reduction. And you could fit like Tyranitar Exadrill in that, Venusaur Torkoal. It's a bit different with Series 7, but that's kind of what I try to like slot my Pokemon into.
Hmm. And we've also definitely in the past in 2017 and 2014 see a lot of weather teams find a lot of success, especially early in the metagame. Uh, and then so now, come like 3 weeks ago, you had the Crown Tundra release. All of a sudden, you have all of these new legendary Pokemon that you told me you've never seen before. You didn't know what they did,
Yeah.
even though like anyone who's been playing for the last few years is familiar with them. Tell me a little bit about the 2 weeks lead up before the tournament, before you had to lock in your team.
Yeah, so the last time I played Pokemon ever was Gen 4, and but I did play like Gen 4 OU, but I was like 12, so it was probably terrible. But so yeah, anything Gen 5 to Gen 7, just don't know, never seen that before. People would be telling me about genies, tapus, all of this. Um, so I was actually really nervous. I didn't have high hopes, but like following social media and stuff, I started like seeing some things, and this is like where my game designer brain picked up of like people were complaining that the move pools are very shallow of these older Pokemon. Like Landorus only gets Earthquake and Fly for stabs, so you feels like you have to max them or like click non stabs. And I know like Tapus don't get Play Rough or something.
Hmm.
Um, so that was like, oh, I know what they're doing. They're weakening these old legendaries to make the new ones good. So now I'm on an even playing field because now I get to play with like Regieleki, Moltres, Glastier, just like I'm on the same page as everyone else now. Like no one's seen these Pokemon and before either. So it was like comforting identifying that in a way, and that's kind of what my team is focused on.
Definitely, and it noticed that you, other than Tapu Fini, you didn't use any of the older Pokemon that just became usable. You used a lot of very strong Pokemon that were just introduced in Crown Tundra that everyone had access to at the same time, as well as some, I guess, some of your favorites from Series 5 and earlier. So, how did you go about building this team?
Yeah, so I like half joke, but I'm actually half serious of like, oh, I just love high base stat totals. Like that's what I look at. And like I even sometimes pull up spreadsheets where I like find effective base stat totals where I would cut the lower attack stat or the lower speed. I'm just like, what Pokemon gives me the most bang for my buck? And when I saw Glastier's base stats, I was like, oh my god, this is my Pokemon. It just the stats are so absurd, and that's just immediately what I went to. And so yeah, the I wanted Glastier. That was just like what I set on, and there was nothing in the 3 weeks to ever get me off of that. So then my whole team just warped around that. So I wanted Trick Room Pokemon with Glastier, Tapu Fini just similar to Metagross. Like I need to protect it from getting Will O Wisp. So that was like the start of it. Uh, then I went into Moltres just as like a direct Metagross answer. And then to set up Moltres, I noticed that redirection was so like on the downturn in this format, and it is way less prevalent.
Hmm.
But to like actually set up a nasty plot, I felt like I needed a Mungus for that, so that's what I went to. And the last slot was like that's what I changed the most. I tried Landorus and Cineroar for damage reduction, and it wasn't until like 6 to 5 days before I realized that dual screens with Grimmsnarl or Regieleki are really good. And so yeah, that's just kind of how I filled out the whole team, and it's all centered around Glastier really.
Yeah, and Glastrier really is just an absolutely crazy Pokemon. I talked about it in my last video. I had a clip of me winning having Glastrier literally do all the damage in an entire game. It's nuts. Like it does that. It's so hard to KO. It just has ridiculous damage output. And Chilling Neigh is like it's beast boost, right? I guess that didn't mean anything to you, but like
Yeah.
it just boosts attack every time it gets a KO. Uh, and like you said, it doesn't have a special attack stat or a speed stat, so all of its stats are being utilized in bulk and in damage, which is it's crazy. And you just and it like you just really identified that early on, and that was really valuable and built around it and built a really strong team around it. Can you tell me a little bit about the Glastrier set and why you chose the moves and stats that you did?
Uh, yeah, it's Glacier's not too complicated. Simple Pokemon, simple spread. It's just 252 health, 252 attack. The moves are the Ice Crash, high horsepower and close combat and protect. Um, Basically, like the only other option you could do is max steel, either heavy slam or smart strike for a steel move. But the max knuckle is so good for countering intimidate, and I just prefer the ground coverage to the steel coverage right now. Um, but yeah, the Pokemon's not that flexible, so I just kind of went with the obvious.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of people try a lot of different items. I've seen a Assault Vest on it. I've seen Weakness Policy on it. I think that Nick Nails used a White Herb set on his Glastrier. Why did you choose to use a Life Orb on it?
Um, I just think Life Orb's the best item in the game right now, so I actually think like Life Orb's at its worst on Glacier, but you just can't catch me playing a team without Life Orb. So that's really the simple of it. But what I learned throughout the tournament, like, oh, this allows me to play a certain way. It lets you pick up one hit KOs on non Dynamax Pokemon, like even with neutral hits and stuff. Like if your Ice Stab is neutral, like you pretty good chance you'll OHKO that Pokemon if it's not Dynamax. So yeah, I don't think Life Orb's like 100% necessary or whatever, but it does let me play in a like very aggressive way, and it lets me abuse screens in the sense that like I could set up Light Screen and Reflect, Dynamax Glastier, and just target whatever they're not Dynamaxing and pick up tons of KOs and Snowball.
Yeah, definitely. I have always felt that, at least in a Dynamax format, I felt the Life Orb is an item that you want to put on the Pokemon that you are Dynamaxing, just because you're not actually taking that much damage like you would in a non-Dynamax format, and it's just the best damage output item in the game right now, other than Weakness Policy, which of course you have in a different Pokemon. So that makes a lot of sense. And then one thing that I really like about the team is that you have a Dusclops with Haze on it. And so a lot of people want to switch in their Incineroars into the Glastrier, and all of a sudden now you have this incredible counterplay to that in that, well, you just remove the stat drops and then take your KO.
Yeah, Haze is great. I actually put Haze kind of last minute, but it just comes up in so many spots. Uh, so like sometimes the win condition against Glacier is just to stack a bunch of Steel Spike boost, and Haze completely cuts that out. Um, Also, Rotom got like really popular between the Victory Road tournament and the Players Cup. So like that, all of a sudden you get to cut out the nasty plot like win condition versus Dusclops.
Hmm.
And of course, it's good against Tapu Fini and yeah, as you said, Intimidate.
Yeah, and so you mentioned that when you were team building, you wanted a Trick Room setter on your team. Why did you choose Dusclops over something like Stakataka or Cresselia or Porygon 2?
Yeah, I was actually playing with Porygon 2 for quite a while, but Dusclops, I don't know, like no one could touch it right now. It actually got better in this series because before you used to have to worry about like Dragapult and Cinderace using like stab super effective attacks. And if you go look at Pikalytics, like the only strong super effective attack is either a Urshifu Wicked Blow, which is abusable in other ways, or a Moltres, which won't OHKO your Dusclops. So um, it, I it's like I like the idea of Porygon 2 more actually of just this like mid-range Trick Room setter that could like heal and stuff. But the fact of the matter is it's just like Ghost type is really strong right now, and Dusclops is just giving me the ability to I was just like 2v1ing people late game with Dusclops. Like that's kind of what I learned throughout the tournament of like, oh, if I have a light screen and reflect, like Dusclops is now my win condition.
Yeah, like Nightshade is really cool because it just does such reliable damage. They can't reduce its damage output. Obviously, you can't hit normal types, but other than that, it's just a fat Pokemon. That Pain Split is also like basically an attacking move because it has such a low base HP, and you just gain back HP while also damaging your opponent. So it's actually really surprising how much pressure Dusclops puts out, and then it's slower than the Glastrier too. So it's like chipping them down so that the Glastrier can take a KO and get that attack boost.
Yeah, and that yeah, Haze being slower is super relevant as well. So you could clear Intimidate and then go to town. Also, uh, like Rotom and Tapu Fini have like relatively low base HP, so that's where the Nightshade started overperforming. Like even if Porygon like has a super effective Thunderbolt into Tapu Fini, like Nightshade is sometimes better still, just because there's a few Pokemon that are like kind of an issue for the team, but have low base HP stats, and then the Nightshade like it feels like it 3-hit KOs them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it makes a lot of sense that Dusclops next to Glastrier is really like one of the strongest combinations of two Pokemon in the metagame right now. And again, like you honed in on that very early, and you got comfortable with it, and it really paid dividends. Can you tell me about some of the rest of the Pokemon on your team?
Yeah, so there's like the Moltres mode. That's like for Metagross, but it's also good against Kartana. Like that's kind of something I noticed was becoming an issue. Was Kartana was a bit scary,
Hmm.
um, but it's just Glastier and Moltres like they just complement each other very well. They don't share that many weaknesses, and they just hit at different angles. Like I won a lot of games because oh my god, I need my trick room counter and this and that, and then like, oh, Moltres used nasty plot. Okay, I lose. So I just get to do a lot of mix-ups. I guess I don't know if there's a Pokemon term for it, but like it's really hard to know what to lead against my team,
Hmm.
and Moltres is just a completely different angle on that. Um, and then Amoonguss and Tapu Fini, it's kind of funny. I started using them less and less just because like so many teams are prepared for them, but they're still good bait because uh, there's a lot of teams that are like randomly Tapu Fini could kill 5 of their Pokemon, but they have a Rillaboom. So now they have to bring Rillaboom if they see Tapu Fini in team preview, and Rillaboom's pretty bad against the rest of my team. So like I could bait out Rillabooms like that. Amoonguss is similar where they need to bring Tapu Fini against me, or they're just going to get spored to death. But the rest of my team doesn't really care about Tapu Fini.
Hmm.
Um, and then Grimmsnarl was the last one. Yeah, that was it was Incineroar for a while, Landorus for a little bit, but yeah, just Mol- um, the damage reduction is so important because Moltres and Glastier are so bulky, and then the screens on top of that just let them like super effective attacks 3-hit KO these Pokemon like max moves under screens. Like so even though you'll look at Rotom Heat, which is like theoretically the scariest Pokemon against me, but Moltres and Glastier are just behind screens are just kind of good against Rotom Heat. And that's like the beautiful mixture of everything that I think really made this team work.
Yeah. So I think that like yeah, like you said, Amoonguss and Tapu Fini both put a lot of team preview pressure on your opponent because it's almost like it's kind of like Ferrothorn in some respects from previous series where you have to respect it. If they have it in the back and you don't have an answer, or in the case of Amoonguss, if you don't lead your answer to it, you just kind of lose like very quickly. It gets out of control, and
Yeah.
so people have to really respect it. I think that like Tapu Fini similarly, if it gets a Calm Mind off, it's off to the races a lot of times against a lot of teams, and you have ways to support that and ways to pressure opponents in other ways, or be it like by setting up screens to make Tapu Fini basically unkillable, or redirecting attacks. I played around a lot with when I was testing out teams, putting Tapu Fini next to redirection and trying to make Tapu Fini the center point of a team. But I think that you've struck a really strong balance where you have two other Pokemon that are the primary and secondary damage dealers, and then if for some reason those don't work out, like maybe against Rotom Heat, you still have a Tapu Fini that pressures it so heavily.
Yep, exactly.
And then I also really like the fact that the Moltres also has like the Moltres and Isource are both such bulky Pokemon, and I you identified correctly that screens really benefit those Pokemon because they are so easily able to stack boosts. And in fact, I noticed that your Moltres doesn't even have that much investment in special attack. It's just
Nah.
primarily bulk. Uh, can you tell me a little bit about how you chose to get to that spread?
Yeah, I didn't do any crazy science behind it, but just playing games, I realized like look, Moltres has to nasty plot. Unless I like have this sick read where I could Dynamax and I know they're gonna hit it for super effective, which to be fair does happen in some game threes when like, oh I let him nasty plot two games in a row. Now I need to like I'm gonna punish it, and I could do some of that, but in most situations, I'm clicking nasty plot before I do anything else. So I don't know. I feel like if you're dealing double damage, your special attack investments kind of stops mattering after a while. And yeah, I wanted it all in bulk. I hit the speed stat to outspeed Thunderous and Tornadus at +1. I felt okay. Anything past that doesn't really matter. So let's just bulk it up, and it ended up really nicely in a way where I hit the first special attack stat bump, and then I could survive a max hailstorm from Glastrier when Moltres is Dynamaxed, like just barely, which is a very, very hard thing to do, but max health and 100 defense EVs in it lets it do just that. And if I have Reflect up, I'm actually like kind of happy taking that because, oh, thanks for the weakness policy and Berserk activation, and I still have like a 30% Moltres like ready to snowball.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really nice. Uh, and so, can you talk about some of the common game plans that your team utilized?
Yeah, so if if you kind of don't want to think much but also don't see intimidate, you could just lead Grimmsnarl Glastier, just set up screens max turn one, and just try to pick up as many KOs as possible. That's like game plan number one. Um, you could do a similar thing with Moltres and Grimmsnarl. And so in the back for these, you always want Dusclops in the back because that's like the late game win condition, but then the back is pretty flexible beyond that. Um, so those are the two like set screens and just go to town modes. Um, and then the other two modes that I commonly use I call the all in modes, and these are basically you either lead Amoonguss with Dusclops or Moltres, and you just redirection and try really hard to set up Trick Room or Nasty Plot, depending on what you want to do. And there are some teams can't like fight through an Amoonguss with redirection, so those are just like super safe options to do when you identify that. So like if they don't have like a grass type with taunt or like fake out and stuff, that's typically when you want to do it. And my Amoonguss has focus sash, so that's what makes it extra safe. Like if they don't have like any specific Amoonguss like answers or whatever, it's taking two attacks, and then you get a free setup.
Yeah, I really like that. It makes it so much more difficult to deal with the Mungus turn one. One other thing that I didn't really catch in my first glance, but you're using Moltres and Tapu Fini, and I think those Pokemon have really good synergy together too. I noticed that Wolf also used a team with Moltres and Tapu Fini, and those are uh, those the fact that you have the ability to not only threaten the Kartana, like you mentioned, that scares Tapu Fini quite a bit, but also you have the ability to hit reduce the special defense of your opponents and then hit hard at Tapu Fini. Makes them have some really unique synergy that people have been utilizing recently.
Yeah, it's really great, and the like hidden synergy is just like they're both so bulky that like I don't know some sets of Pokemon just can't damage through them, and yeah, it's just kind of silly like in some situations in these late games where I have the screens up and the Dynamax is over, and it's just like, oh, your Regieleki like four hit KOs my Moltres or Tapu Fini, like get out of here.
Yeah, that's crazy. So, what would you say some of the strengths of the teams this team is, and what would you say some of the toughest matchups you would hit? would you say some of the weaknesses of the team are?
Yeah, so it's I keep joking. I've been joking for it like ever since I locked in the team. I'm like, wow, this team doesn't have any good matchups. So that's kind of both the strength and the weakness. I think the strength of it is it feels like you can really beat anything. Just again, screens and ice horse. I really don't care if you hit it for super effective. Um, but yeah, the weakness is like, yeah, you're not getting any free wins either. There are a lot of moments where during the tournament, like at literally every round, I'm like, oof, if they protected right there, that would have been bad. And so yeah, there's no easy wins, which over the course of a long tournament, that will hurt your win rate and hurt your chances. And then yeah, the specific Pokemon that like I'm really worried about right now is Rotom Heat. Um, it's kind of weird because like I outstat Rotom Heat just because Rotom Heat's like relatively weak Pokemon. But yeah, I think if someone like really has like builds a clever Rotom Heat team and like really could navigate around it, they could do my team like they could work my team pretty badly. Like especially like if you were to get Rotom Heat and then build a team to like have a good matchup against mine, like yeah, I don't think I'd have a chance. So those are the things I'm trying to like shore up right now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that if like a combination of Moltres and Tapu Fini and Glastrier becomes very common, we might start to see that become a more prominent trend in the metagame with Rotom Heat and really trying to support the Rotom Heat rather than having like most of the Rotom Heat that I've seen so far have been in more of a supporting role where they can do damage, but they primarily are trying to support other attackers. But I see what you
Yeah,
mean. If Rotom
exactly.
Heat is being enabled against this team, then you can definitely struggle quite a bit with it. Although that being said, something like Haze Dusclops can really put a damper on those plans. Even something like Soak Sash Spore Amoonguss can really put a damper on the plans because they can't protect it with terrain. So you definitely have some counterplay to it, and even if it does do a lot of damage to a lot of different things.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of what I was banking on because I knew Rotom Heat was gaining in popularity the week leading up, but the way people were using it was like, oh, this matches up well like against a lot of little things, so like it'll be a part of my team but not a central part, and that's kind of what I had to take advantage of. Um, but yeah, I think the metagame has so much room to grow. So we'll see, what changes I need to make and what changes other people are gonna have to make.
Hmm. Definitely. And so, of the first 5 rounds of the tournament and you lead up to top 16, what would you say the highlight of those 5 rounds were?
Yeah, my last match in week one was it was so it was so nerve wracking. It My opponent was playing a very simple like colossal Blacephalon team, but it also had like imprisoned Mesprit. So like the I just saw the matchup like flash before my eyes. I'm like, okay, you either go colossal and I trick room on you and win, or you like do imprison Mesprit and into my trick room and like it's gonna be really hard. And but like I could counter Mesprit by like just not going for trick room and then Mesprit's kind of dead weight. Um, so like I was so in my head game one. I'm like, they see a Dusclops and Mungus, they're gonna go in prison. So then I'll lead Moltres, and they just led Blacephalon Colossal. I instantly lost, and then I actually beat the Mesprit versus Dusclops matchup, game two, which was it was really tricky. And then game three was so weird, where their Blacephalon Scarf, and then I led Grimmsnarl, Glacier, and we both they maxed Blacephalon turn one. I maxed Glacier. We just trade Dynamaxes, and then we're basically playing 3v3 no Dynamax. And my Pokemon lineup was Grimmsnarl, Amoonguss, and Dusclops. So I just like nightshaded 3 Pokemon to death.
That's crazy. That sounds like a really exciting match, and I wish I got to see that. Uh, and I actually had to face that exact team or very similar team in the Victory Road tournament the past week, the week prior to the Players Cup, and it's a very scary team to face. So I'm glad that you won and you managed to get to the top 16 of the North American Players Cup. And yeah, so and thank you so much for coming on. It's this is a really cool team, probably like I would call a metagame defining team, and I'm really excited to hear about it and to hear about it firsthand. Do you have any last words or shout outs that you want to give?
Um, yeah, as far as shout outs, shout out to the tub or whatever the public facing cabal is called. All of y'all helped me so much. Just like even if I kind of made this team by myself, like just all of our combined knowledge like helps me so much, and yeah, I'm like super grateful. I think it was just a huge level up starting working with y'all. Um, so shout out to y'all, like first and foremost. And then yeah, I guess the only thing I want to plug is my Twitter account, which is Donald WSJR. I'm sure you'll put it in the description or something.
Yeah, that'll be in the description down below. And I know you also wrote a team report, which is on the RVGC subreddit. And so I'll link that if you want to read more about it and maybe talk to Donald directly about the team itself. And so thank you so much for coming on. This was really awesome, and uh, I'm looking forward to seeing how you do in the future.
Yeah, thank you. This was great. Happy to come on anytime I have a good result.